Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Agile IT Tech Talk. I'm Sean Spicer, Head of Marketing here at Agile IT. Today, we're joined by David Branscombe, a Microsoft architect, who's going to be demonstrating how to use Cloud App Security alongside Microsoft Flow. So Cloud App Security already has automatic policies that can be set up to deny user access or to mark a file as private, but Flow adds a whole bunch more to that. And David's going to kind of show how that works. David, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thanks for asking. All right, so what I'm going to be talking about, as just mentioned, is automating Cloud App Security using Flow. That's my email address and my blog article link, Cloudy Happy People. So let me just give you a kind of a high-level overview of what you need in order to make the stuff that I'm going to show you work. So the first thing, obviously, is you have to have the licensing. So you have to have a Flow plan, and you have to have Microsoft Cloud App Security licenses in your tenant. That's kind of obvious, right? The next thing is you create an API token in Cloud App Security, and you need to save that token maybe to a WordPad or something like that, just somewhere that you can reference it later because you're going to need it, and I'll show you where you get that information as well. After that, you go to your Flow portal and you create a new flow. When you start the flow, it's going to be a flow that you create from scratch. Even though there are a bunch of template flows, you're going to want to create a new one. And when you do this, you're going to configure a Cloud App Security trigger and select the option when an alert is generated. Again, I'm going to be showing you what this all looks like, but just so you have this stuff documented. You'll also be prompted under authentication settings for that API token. So that's why we saved it previously. So you'll want to have that the value of that token available to paste into that section. At that point, you just define the flow that should be triggered when one of the policies in Cloud App Security generates an alert. So whether that's mass downloads by a user or login from a risky IP address or whatever it is, Cloud App Security is going to generate an alert. And then you want a workflow to be kicked off by Flow. And that can involve any number of different paths and steps. So you can add an action, you can add a logical condition, you can switch case conditions, you can create loops, whatever you want to do. So you save that playbook, and then you go back to your Cloud App Security portal, and you go to policies, and the row of the policy of the alerts that you want to forward to Flow, you get the properties of that policy, and or the settings for that policy, and there's a section there under alerts where you can choose to send the alerts to Flow, and at that point you choose the name of the playbook from the drop-down menu, and you're all set to go. So here's a real quick one that I'm going to walk through. This is one that involves automatic ticket generation. So the basic process of what we're going to do is when an alert is created in Cloud App Security, I want to post a message to Microsoft Teams, to the help desk team, and then create a record in ServiceNow. I have a developer account for ServiceNow, so I'm able to pull information from that ServiceNow database. And then I also want to send an email maybe to the help desk manager or whatever, just so he's aware of this ticket being generated. So this is just an example. You can create it any number of different ways, but let's take a look at how this would actually be done in practice. So here is, okay, let's start at the beginning. So one of the first things that we want to do is generate that token, right? So the API token. So we go up to our settings over here. We go to security extensions. And here is where we create our API token. So you just go like this. You type the token name or whatever, generate the token. And then this is the type of token that you're going to want to save off to the side and keep a record of that. Okay. So let's go back here and actually create the flow that I just described. So I create from blank again. And what I want to do is create a flow that has as its starting point a Cloud App Security event. So I just type in Cloud App Security, click on that. Then I have just the one trigger is the only one that's available right now. So when an alert is generated, okay? So when an alert is generated, remember the first thing we wanted to do was to post a message in Teams. So I say new step, Microsoft Teams. Hopefully I spelled that correctly. Yep. And it gives me a couple different options. So I want to post a message in Teams. I'll get the unique ID of the team, and it gives me a list of all the teams that are in my tenant. So right now there's only a few of them, but you can imagine this might take a little bit of time if it was a fairly large organization. So Contoso Help Desk team. And then what is the channel that I want to post this message in? So I'll say ServiceNow tickets. So all this has already been created on the back end. And then the body of the message, I can add dynamic content into the message. So it'll pull this information from the information in Cloud App Security. So I can say alert display name, alert type, the category, whatever I want to add to that. So let's say just alert display name and type. Next thing I do is connect to ServiceNow. So ServiceNow. And again, you can see that there's multiple options here. So I'll say create a record in ServiceNow. And I've already got my connection established to my ServiceNow database, which I think should be visible. Nope, not visible in there. Okay, so now it's going to give me an option for what type of records I want to create in ServiceNow. So let's say I want to create one for a user account. Oh, let's do password reset. Password reset request. Okay. Now it gives me a whole lot of information that could also be added to this ServiceNow ticket, and I can customize this however I want. And some of it will be dynamically generated information, like the created time. I can pull up the created time based on what was created in Cloud App Security, or I can define by the user. A lot of different things. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is for right now. And then the final step is I want to send an email to the network manager. So type in Outlook, then send an email. I get the option to send it to Isaiah. Get rid of that extra colon. Specify the subject for the email. And I can create whatever I want here. So I can either add dynamic information from ServiceNow. You can say created and body, created by, and status, whatever. And then just save it. Okay. So now the alert's been generated. I can go back here and change the name of it. ServiceNow ticket. Save it. All right. So now what I've got is this flow called ServiceNow ticket. Now what I would do is go back into my Cloud App Security, go to my policies, find the type of event that I'm curious about. So let's say multiple failed login attempts, since this was a password reset scenario. And this doesn't necessarily mean this is how you configure it, but just as an example. So you notice in the alert section, I've got this ability to send alerts to flow. So I check the box, and then I have the option to select a playbook. Okay, so there's ServiceNow ticket. So now I've associated this policy with that ServiceNow flow, which means that anytime this trigger or this policy is triggered, this multiple failed login attempts is triggered, it will kick off this workflow in Flow and create that ticket in ServiceNow. It'll send a notification to Teams, and it'll send an email to the network manager. So that's a pretty cool one. Let's do something a little more complex, though. So let's say we're going to create one from blank. Do that. And let's just kind of show what that's going to look like. So what I want to do here is block unsanctioned apps on the firewall using CAS Discovery Alerts. So one of the things that you can do in CAS is identify new applications on your network that are being used, new cloud apps. So if you find that people are using AOL Instant Messenger or some other cloud app that you don't want them using, right? Yeah, so I don't know how many people are using that, but what is it you can do? So when an alert's generated, you want to send email with whatever option, and in this scenario, what we're doing is creating an email that gives the user, the recipient, the option of either blocking at the firewall or resolving an alert. So they're getting options in the email, right? And then based on what their choice is, so what the selected option is, if the selected option is equal to block at firewall, then we're going to have a decision tree. And that's what this looks like. So the decision tree is if they did not select that, then we just want to resolve the alert because they haven't decided that was important. On the other hand, if they choose yes, I want to block this at the firewall, then there's a whole different process. So in this scenario, what we're looking at is an HTTP post because we're using a Palo Alto firewall. And we can actually interact with the firewall using this JSON code and connecting to this web page. So that will allow us to actually dynamically configure the firewall just through this flow. So let's take a look at how that would actually happen. Oh, and then of course we create the alert in the policy. So let's take a look at creating that policy. Okay, so just as we did before, Cloud App Security. And when an alert is generated, so same exact process that we had before. And in this case, what I'm going to do is first create the email that goes to, let's say, the network manager. In this case, I'm not just going to send an email. I'm going to send an email with options. So send email with options. So it gives me a little bit different interface. So I have the same recipient, get rid of the trailing colon. I can customize the subject line. And I can define my choices. So in this case, what I'm going to do is define either block at firewall or resolve alert. Okay, so those are my options. And I can call these whatever I want, right? That's just what I happen to choose. Those are going to be the conditions that Isaiah will see in the email when he gets it. At that point, he's going to need to take some action on that email. And so what we want is a control. That control is going to be a condition. So the conditions of what actually happens here. So if the condition is selected option, so whatever his selected option, if it is equal to block at firewall, right? Make sure I spell it right. Then I've got these two choices. I've got these two branches that I can choose from. So the easy one is the no branch. So let's do that one first. So what we're going to do here is go to Cloud App Security. And what we basically want to do is resolve the alert. And the alert ID is going to be dynamically provided here by the provider alert ID. And that side of it's done. So if Isaiah does not choose to block at the firewall, we're just going to resolve the alert. End of tree. On the other hand, if he says, yes, I want to block this app at the firewall, you add an action. As I mentioned before, the way that we interact with the Palo Alto firewall is over an HTTP call or HTTP action. And it's just a standard post. I get the URL that I'm going to connect with. Nope. And then the body, which is going to be the JSON for this particular, for making the change on the firewall. So I got this stuff copied off to the side. And what I want to do is add the domain name of what I want to block. Okay, so now the basic idea is when an alert's generated, it's going to send an email to Isaiah. He's going to have the option to block at the firewall or resolve the alert. If he chooses to, if he chooses to block at the firewall, if he does not choose to block at the firewall, then the alert will be resolved automatically. If he chooses to block the firewall, then we're going to connect over HTTP to the firewall and configure the firewall to block that that domain. So we save it. Hopefully this will save correctly without any errors. Change it up here. CAS block at firewall. Oops, I gotta save it. Otherwise it'll be wonky. Okay. So if I go back to my flows, you'll see I've got one now called CAS block at firewall. I go back to my policies, get rid of that one that I had before. And see if there's something like new unsanctioned app or something along those lines. And we can create something. So let's just say data exfiltration unsanctioned app. It doesn't really make a big difference what we choose here. So I go to alerts. I see send alerts to flow. I select my playbook. So now what I need to do is go back here. So you notice that the Cloud App Security one is not showing up here. So what do? I can go back to Security Extensions, and my playbooks should all show up in here. Okay, so there's CAS block at firewall. So maybe it just needed to be refreshed. So let's go back to the policies and go to data exfiltration, flow. Where it's not showing. It might just take a second for it to show up. It'd be a little slow on the back end. It's there. Well, in any case, when it shows up, which will be maybe in a couple minutes, then that's where we configure it. And then whenever this trigger, this Cloud App Security policy is triggered, then again it will kick off that flow, create the email, and go through that whole process and does it in an automated way. Then you just click update, you're done. So pretty easy. Sorry that last one didn't update as I was expecting, but that's all there is to it, to creating these flows that interact with Cloud App Security. It's a very powerful tool. You can use it for a number of different things. It just really is all up to your creativity and how the business runs its processes and what the flow of work is. But gives you a lot of flexibility. So that's the end of my presentation, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Great, thank you very much, David. So I'm curious, do all the fields get the dynamic content drop down?
Not necessarily all of them, but the ones that are conducive to that, like the I don't think all of them do, but there are. I would say most of them do. I'm not 100% that all of them do, but
Okay.
most.
Yeah, so I'm really surprised at how easy that is. I'm checking right now to see if there's any questions.